She slapped the wrong man in the elevator, but he was the CEO, and he couldn't let her go. She saw him push an elderly woman into the elevator, and without thinking, she slapped him, hard, right in front of everyone. What she didn't know was the truth. The man she just humiliated, he was the CEO of the company she was about to interview for. And what no one expected is that he couldn't let her go. Before we continue, if you enjoy touching and inspiring stories like this one, make sure to subscribe to the channel and leave a like. Now, let's get back to the story. The sound echoed like a shot in the silent elevator lobby, a single, sharp slap, so sudden, so clean, that even the security camera above the door seemed to flinch. Chloe's hand was still in the air when she realized something was wrong. The man she had just struck didn't shout. He didn't stumble. He simply turned, slowly. His gaze, steel gray and unreadable, met hers. Not angry, not surprised, just curious. That kind of stillness was more unnerving than any outburst. For a second, no one spoke. Not the elderly woman beside them, now looking equally confused. Not the receptionist who'd gasped behind her desk. Not Chloe herself, her lips slightly parted, as if her own hand had moved without her permission. Her chest rose and fell quickly. She was breathing too fast, too shallow. I saw you push her, Chloe stammered, finally breaking the silence, her voice trembling with adrenaline. She was trying to get in, and you... I helped her in, the man said calmly, as if explaining something trivial. His voice was smooth, even low, but it seemed to carry across the entire lobby like a judgment. She nearly tripped on the gap. Chloe blinked. Her eyes darted to the woman, who gave a small nod. Yes, he caught my elbow before I could fall, the old woman added kindly, still trying to process the situation. Dear, I think you misunderstood. Her world tilted. Oh no. Chloe's stomach dropped as her hand slowly fell to her side, the red flush rising to her cheeks. And then it hit her. Not the memory of her slap, not the growing number of people now staring at them, but who he was. Elijah Hale. Her mind scrambled. The face from the business magazines, the same gray eyes that had once been described as dissecting by a Forbes columnist. The CEO of Hale Enterprises, the man who built one of the fastest-growing international tech brands from the ground up, the man she was supposed to interview with. In 10 minutes, her mouth dried. I'm so sorry, she breathed, mortified. I thought... I know what you thought, Elijah replied, that same calm gaze never leaving her face. You just didn't bother to confirm it. The elevator behind him dinged, the doors opening silently. Elijah didn't step inside. He was still looking at her. Chloe didn't know where to put her hands, her eyes, her shame. I'll go, she said, stepping back, trying to disappear. This was a mistake. I'm sorry for... No, he said suddenly. She froze. Elijah turned to the woman and offered a quiet smile. Ma'am, would you excuse us? The elderly woman, still holding her purse tightly, nodded and walked into the elevator. The doors closed behind her, leaving Chloe alone with the man she'd just slapped, who also happened to be the most powerful figure in the building. Her skin burned. She looked up, trying to meet his eyes with some shred of dignity. I'm not here to cause trouble, she said. It was an honest mistake. I'll leave. You don't need to worry about the interview. You're here for the editorial role, aren't you? He interrupted. Chloe blinked. Yes. Then don't leave. She paused. You're not serious? I'm very serious. There was no irony in his voice, no sarcasm, just a quiet conviction that made her heart race. You think I should still walk into that interview? She asked, almost laughing from the sheer absurdity. After that? Elijah tilted his head slightly, like he was studying a puzzle. You stood up for a stranger. You made the wrong call, but your instinct was to protect someone. That says something. Chloe's lips parted slightly. She hadn't expected that. Not kindness, not understanding. But, he added, you should know when to pause before you act. A beat of silence hung between them. Then, without another word, Elijah turned and walked into the elevator again, this time alone. Just before the doors closed, he looked at her one last time, expression unreadable, and said, "I'll see you in 10 minutes." The doors shut. Chloe stood frozen in the middle of the lobby, heart pounding so loudly she swore the receptionist could hear it. She was supposed to impress him. She was supposed to walk in composed, poised, professional. But instead she'd walked into the most important meeting of her life with a raised hand and a hasty judgment. And now he wanted to see her? Time seemed to slow, but the clock didn't. 9 minutes later, her fingers trembled as she adjusted the strap of her bag on her shoulder, eyes fixed on the nameplate on the office door, Elijah Hale, CEO. Chloe had never felt more like an imposter. When his assistant waved her in, her feet felt like blocks of cement. But she walked. She kept her head up, even if her insides were unraveling. He was sitting behind his desk, sleeves still rolled up, sweater still flawless. That same expression, somewhere between curiosity and restraint, met her again. "Miss Collins," he said, motioning toward the chair across from him. "Please sit." She sat cautiously. He opened a folder in front of him. Her resume. She'd worked for 2 mid-level publications, freelanced for a few big names, and handled 3 crisis editorials that had gone semi-viral. "You write well," he said, "but more importantly, you observe well. That's rarer." Chloe blinked. "After what just happened, I wouldn't call myself observant." Elijah's lips twitched. "No, but you're bold, and boldness can't be taught." She didn't know what to say. Compliment or warning? Was this really happening? "I have one question," he said, closing the folder. She sat straighter. "Anything. If I hadn't told you I was the CEO, would you have walked away?" Her breath caught. That question, direct and quiet, cut deeper than any raised voice. She hesitated, then answered honestly, "Yes." Elijah nodded once, not angry, not smug, just knowing. "That's good," he said after a moment, "because the world has enough people who only care when someone's watching." Then he leaned back slightly. "I'd like you to come back tomorrow, if you're willing to try again with less slapping." Chloe laughed before she could stop herself. It escaped, light and embarrassed. And for the first time Elijah smiled, not a smirk, not polite. A real subtle smile that made his eyes soften just a little. She nodded slowly. "I'll be here." She got up to leave, still unsure if any of this was real. But just before she stepped out the door, Elijah's voice stopped her. "Oh, and Miss Collins," she turned. "I haven't been slapped in a long time," he said. "I'm still trying to decide if I should thank you." The next morning, Chloe stood in front of her bedroom mirror, staring at herself like she didn't recognize the woman looking back. Same long, dark brown hair, same soft waves tumbling past her shoulders, same green eyes. But they didn't look steady anymore. They looked scared. She'd been through 100 interviews before. She'd pitched to editors with years more experience, defended features she'd bled over to skeptical boards, even faced layoffs without flinching. But none of it had ever made her hands tremble the way they were trembling now. Because this wasn't just an interview anymore. This was her second chance after publicly slapping a billionaire CEO. She pressed her palms against her pants to steady them and took a deep breath. "Elijah Hale," she whispered to herself, the man who said less slapping like it was a normal office memo. A reluctant smile crept up on her lips. The truth was, she hadn't stopped thinking about him, that quiet gaze, the self-control, the way he hadn't humiliated her when he could have. There was something in him that intrigued her, something more human than the photos and headlines ever showed. But that didn't mean she could afford to daydream. She had to prove she was more than an impulsive disaster with fast hands. Morning light spilled across the tall glass panels of Hale Enterprises as Chloe finally stepped inside. She was 5 minutes late. Not because she overslept, not because she missed the train, but because she'd spent a full 7 minutes outside the building, just standing there, trying to convince herself not to run away. Inside, the office was bustling, sleek, polished. Glass walls, modern artwork, soft-toned luxury everywhere. She felt like a misplaced page in a pristine book. Elijah's assistant greeted her with a nod, eyes betraying no amusement, no recognition, no pity, which was a relief. "You can head to the editorial suite. Mr. Hale will join shortly." Chloe walked down the hallway, heels tapping like Morse code across the floor. When she stepped into the room, she paused. It was nothing like she expected. No boardroom. No rows of intimidating executives, just a wide-open space with whiteboards, desks, mood boards, and one long table scattered with mock-ups and layout sheets. A small team of 4 people looked up when she entered. They weren't dressed like tech moguls or fashion editors. They were dressed like her. Casual, smart, creative chaos. One of them stood up, a petite woman with glasses and sharp cheekbones. "You're the slap girl, right?" Chloe's heart sank. I'm joking," the woman said with a sly grin. "Sort of. I'm Lena, art director. Welcome to The Fold." "The Fold?" Chloe echoed. "The company's new editorial branch. Elijah's passion project. He's been building it from the shadows for months now, but this week we go live. And apparently, you made the cut." Chloe blinked. "Wait, I got the job?" Lena smirked. "You didn't know." Before Chloe could react, a deep voice answered from behind. "She knows now." She turned. Elijah had walked in unnoticed. Same white shirt, same sweater, same impossible presence. He moved across the room with quiet confidence, giving everyone a nod, but his eyes landed on Chloe like they had their own gravity. "We're a week from launch," he said. "No room for safe choices. That's why you're here." "Because I'm unsafe?" Chloe asked, half teasing, half terrified. "Because you're honest," Elijah replied, "even when it's messy." Then to the group, "Let's give her something to sink her teeth into." Later, that day, Chloe found herself sitting at a shared table, staring at a digital document with the title, "First Feature, Real People, Real Change." It was a human-centered series Elijah wanted to headline the site with. True stories, quiet power, not clickbait, real connection. Lena slid into the seat beside her with a coffee in each hand, offering one wordlessly. Chloe accepted it, grateful. "He never does that," Lena said. Chloe glanced at her. "Does what?" "Hire someone without a full board vote, or show up in person twice in one day." Chloe shifted. "You think it was a pity move?" Lena sipped her drink. "No. If Elijah Hale pities you, you're gone. That man doesn't do sentiment. He does logic." Chloe looked down at the screen again, unsure what to feel. "Why is he even doing this?" she asked softly. "A billionaire CEO launching a human story platform? It doesn't exactly scream return on investment." Lena's eyes flicked toward the glass walls, where Elijah stood speaking with one of the content leads. "People think he's all machines and code. But something happened a few years ago. Something shifted. He doesn't talk about it. But since then, he's been different." Chloe watched him from across the room, still composed, still unreadable. But then, just for a moment, he looked over his shoulder. Their eyes met. And again, that quiet. That moment that felt longer than it should have. A pause in the day. Just for them. He gave the faintest nod. She looked away quickly. That night, back in her apartment, Chloe sat curled up on the couch, laptop closed, lights low, the city humming outside her window. Just as her mind began to quiet, her phone buzzed. Unknown number. Elijah. "Tomorrow, 8:30 a.m. Rooftop cafe across the street. Bring your ideas. First story's yours." She stared at the screen, heart skipping. Then another message popped up. "Elijah. Also, thank you for slapping me. I think I needed it." Chloe dropped her phone on the couch, flustered, laughing under her breath. She didn't know what this was yet. A job? A second chance? Something more? But for the first time in a long time, she felt like something had begun. Something real. The rooftop cafe across the street wasn't the kind of place where CEOs had meetings. There were no private booths, no quiet corners, no baristas with headset microphones, just a few scattered tables, cheap but strong coffee, and the warm smell of fresh croissants curling in the morning air. At 8:28 a.m., Chloe climbed the last step of the narrow stairwell, breath caught between nerves and caffeine. Elijah was already there, sitting at the corner table with his sleeves rolled up, coffee in hand, staring out across the city skyline like he belonged to it. He looked up as she approached. "No slap today?" he asked calmly, a glint of humor in his eyes. Chloe managed a half smile. "I left that part of me at home." "Shame," he said, gesturing to the seat across from him. "It's becoming your signature move." She sat, setting down her notebook. "I brought 3 pitch ideas," she said, jumping straight into it. "But the one I'm most drawn to is this woman I met during a freelance project. She runs a community kitchen out of her own garage. No funding, no staff, just shows up and feeds people." Elijah leaned in slightly. "She doesn't want attention," Chloe continued. "She hates being called a hero, but she is one, quietly, the kind no one writes about." Elijah was silent for a moment, then nodded slowly. "That's exactly the kind of story the Fold needs." Chloe's shoulders eased. "A little." He took a sip of his coffee, then set it down. "You ever wonder what people think when they see us?" he asked suddenly. She tilted her head. "Us?" "You, me, sitting here," Chloe blinked. "I mean, I'm guessing most people think we're talking business." He gave a small nod. "Maybe. Why?" "Because when I was 24, I got told by a VC partner that I looked like I was born in a lab, not a living room. Too polished, too cold. He said no one would ever trust me with something human." Chloe blinked, caught off guard. "I didn't know how to answer," he went on, eyes still on the skyline. "So I doubled down. Suits, numbers, walls. People assumed what they wanted, and I let them." Chloe studied him for a moment. "But you're building the Fold," she said. "That's not cold." He looked at her then, really looked. "That's because someone I loved told me I was disappearing," he said softly. "And I realized they were right." Something in his voice pulled at her. But before she could ask more, he stood up just as casually as he'd sat. "Walk with me," he said. By the time they reached the street, the morning had fully arrived. Chloe and Elijah walked side by side down the sidewalk, passing vendors setting up their stands, a young man chasing a runaway paper cup, and 2 teenagers laughing too loudly about something they wouldn't remember in 10 years. Chloe was quiet, thinking. Finally, she asked, "Who was it?" Elijah turned slightly. "Who?" "The person you loved, the one who said you were disappearing." A beat. He slipped his hands into his pockets. "My sister," he said. Chloe blinked. She hadn't expected that. "She died 3 years ago," he added. "Car accident. She was the only person who ever saw through the silence, who called me out without fear." Chloe slowed, heart heavy. "I'm sorry," she said. He gave a small nod. "Me too." They kept walking. "She would have liked you," Elijah said after a pause. "You act first, apologize later. That was her specialty." Chloe smiled sadly. "She sounds amazing." She was. They stopped at a small corner park bench. Elijah sat. She joined him, and for a while they didn't speak, not because there was nothing to say, but because some moments don't need filling. Later that afternoon, back at the Fold, the energy in the office felt slightly different, like something unspoken was passing from desk to desk. Lena raised an eyebrow as Chloe stepped back into the bullpen. "You've got that look," she said. "What look?" "The I had coffee with a billionaire, and now I don't know if I'm employed or in a fever dream look." Chloe laughed under her breath, shaking her head. "I think I'm starting to like working here." "You think?" Lena asked. "I don't know. It's complicated. Girl, he hired you after you slapped him. Everything is complicated now." Chloe opened her laptop, heart still somewhere on that rooftop, but work pulled her in fast. By noon, She was knee-deep in a draft, fingers flying, brain firing on instinct, the kind of writing that felt like breathing. That's when her phone buzzed again. "Elijah, how fast can you get to 16th and Baxter?" She frowned, replied, "Chloe, 20 minutes. "Why?" "Elijah, there's someone I want you to meet. At 12:27 p.m., Chloe stepped onto the corner of 16th and Baxter. It was a quiet street, not businessy, not fancy, just the kind of place that felt slightly forgotten, but alive in its own way, more like the city's forgotten edge. Chloe spotted Elijah standing in front of an old brick building with faded murals on the side. "Welcome to the best sandwich shop in the city," he said as she approached. "What is this?" she asked, amused. "This," he said, pushing open the glass door, "is where I used to hide." Inside, the shop smelled like toasted bread and oregano. A woman behind the counter grinned when she saw him. "Elijah Hale, you still know how to chew?" he chuckled. "Barely. Chloe, meet Carla. She makes the only tuna melt I ever cried over." Carla barked a laugh. "Don't lie. That was the onions." Chloe smiled. This was new. Elijah, relaxed, known, real. They sat at a corner table while Carla busied herself with the sandwiches. "You brought me here for food," Chloe teased. "No," he said. "I brought you here because if you're going to write about people, you should know mine." Chloe looked at him, surprised. "Is this still about the slap?" she asked quietly. Elijah met her eyes. "No, it's about everything after it." She felt her throat tighten. He was letting her in, and suddenly, it didn't feel like a job anymore. It felt like a beginning. By the time the sun dipped below the city skyline, Chloe had a full stomach, a notebook full of scrawled ideas, and a head full of questions she wasn't ready to ask. Elijah didn't talk much during lunch, not because he was distracted, because he was observing, always observing. The way Chloe moved, spoke, listened, the way she tilted her head when Carla told a story about her late husband and how Elijah used to bring extra sandwiches to the shelter across the street. He watched her like he was still trying to decide who she really was. But Chloe? She'd already started to see through him. This wasn't about a slap anymore. This was about a man who had built walls so tall most people didn't even try to look over them. But she had, without asking, without waiting. And something in him had opened. Now, back at her apartment, Chloe sat cross-legged on the couch, laptop balanced on her knees, typing the opening line of her story. Sometimes the most powerful people in a city aren't on magazine covers. They're at the end of a quiet hallway, stirring soup for strangers. She paused, reread it, smiled. Then her phone buzzed again. This time, it was Lena. "Emergency, come outside." Chloe frowned, then quickly grabbed her coat and headed down the stairs. By 8:02 p.m., Chloe stepped outside to find Lena's car double-parked at the curb, hazard lights blinking like it was making a statement. Lena rolled down the passenger side window, smirking. "You own anything other than cream-colored blouses?" she asked. Chloe laughed. "This is barely cream, it's almond." "Sure," Lena smirked. "Hop in, you're coming with me." To where? To not think for a few hours. By the time they reached the jazz bar on the East End, it was already past 10. The place was dimly lit and buzzing with quiet energy, soft music, clinking glasses, and the occasional burst of laughter floating up from the bar. Chloe sipped something sweet and fizzy, leaning in toward Lena as the other woman gestured animatedly at a musician she apparently used to almost date, but then he ghosted her for a saxophone. Chloe laughed, for real this time. Not politely, not to hide nerves. It felt good to just be. But halfway through a story about Lena's terrible attempt at salsa lessons, Chloe's phone buzzed again. She glanced at the screen. Elijah Hale. Her breath caught. "You gonna get that?" Lena asked, raising an eyebrow. Chloe hesitated, then stood up, phone pressed to her ear as she stepped out into the cold night air. "Hello. I hope I'm not interrupting." Elijah's voice came, calm and quiet. "You are," Chloe said, "but only a little. a soft chuckle on the other end. "I was just thinking about the headline," he said. "For your first story." She smiled. "So was I." There was a pause. Then, without warning, he said, "I don't usually call people." Chloe leaned against the brick wall, watching her breath cloud in the air. "You don't seem like the calling type." "I'm not." "Then why now?" Another pause. "Because I wanted to hear your voice," he said. Her heart stilled. He wasn't flirting. It didn't sound like a line. It sounded honest, vulnerable, and that scared her more than anything. "Elijah," she said softly, "you know this can get complicated, right?" "Yes," he said, "but I've lived most of my life avoiding complicated, and I'm still lonely." She closed her eyes. Breath caught in her chest. She could feel it, the fragile line between what they were building and what they were risking, and part of her wanted to cross it, badly. "Okay," she whispered, "then let's be careful." The next morning, Chloe walked into the fold expecting everything to feel different. But it didn't. The usual buzz filled the space. Lena's playlist thumped low in the background. Emails flew back and forth. On the surface, it was just another day. But something had shifted. Elijah wasn't in his office. Instead, a woman was waiting at reception, mid-30s, sharply dressed with an aura that said, "Don't underestimate me." She stood when Chloe entered, smiling politely. "Hi, I'm Talia Quinn, VP of Public Relations." Chloe blinked. I didn't know you were coming." "No one did," Talia said. "I like surprises, especially when they involve him." Chloe frowned. "Elijah?" Talia's smile sharpened. "You've been spending a lot of time with him, haven't you?" Chloe felt a twist in her stomach. "We're working on a launch." Talia stepped closer. "I've known Elijah for 8 years. There are exactly 3 people he's ever let into his inner orbit, and all 3 got burned." The words hung in the air. Talia leaned in slightly. "Just a little advice. Don't mistake his attention for permanence. He's brilliant, but he doesn't stay." Chloe's face didn't move, but her heart stung. "I appreciate your concern," she said calmly, "but I'll make my own decisions." Talia nodded, stepping back. "Suit yourself. Just don't say no one warned you." By early afternoon, Elijah finally returned, coat slung over his shoulder, eyes scanning the room until they quietly settled on her. "Walk with me," he said. They moved through the hallway in silence. Once they were alone in the stairwell, he stopped. "Talia spoke to you," he said. Chloe nodded. "She thinks I'll get burned." Elijah looked down for a moment. "She's not wrong." "Why?" Chloe asked. "Because you're scared, or because you won't let someone stay?" He looked up, something breaking in his gaze. "I lost the last person I let stay," he said. "Not to betrayal, to fate. And I haven't trusted anyone since." Chloe's voice dropped. "Then why me?" Elijah stepped closer. "Because you didn't need me to be someone else. Even when you thought I was wrong, you acted." She searched his eyes. "And what if I am the wrong person?" she asked quietly. "Then it's my turn to be wrong." And with that he reached for her hand, not forcefully, not dramatically. Just enough. Enough to let her know this wasn't about roles anymore. It was about something real. By the end of the week, everyone at the fold could feel it, even if no one dared to say it out loud. Chloe and Elijah weren't just working well together, they were moving differently. Like the space between them had narrowed, like the invisible line that normally separates boss and employee, stranger and confidant, had started to blur, and Chloe knew it. She could feel it in the way his gaze lingered when she explained a pitch, in the way her chest tightened every time his name lit up her phone, in the way the simple act of sitting beside him during meetings made her forget how to breathe properly. But it wasn't just attraction. That would have been easier to brush off. It was the quiet between them that didn't feel empty, that felt understood, and that somehow was scarier than anything else. Chloe stepped through the doorway of his penthouse, eyes wide. Friday night came quietly, just like everything between them had since the rooftop. "I still can't believe you live like this," Chloe said, stepping into the penthouse for the first time. She hadn't been invited as an employee. Elijah had called her that afternoon and said, "No meetings, just come over. I owe you a real dinner." The space was vast, modern and sleek, yes, but it wasn't cold like she expected. Bookshelves lined the walls. Soft jazz hummed from unseen speakers. A large, abstract painting of muted blues and grays hung above the fireplace. "Believe it or not, I live alone like a normal person," Elijah said, appearing from the kitchen with 2 glasses of red wine. "No secret staff hiding behind doors. No robot butlers," Chloe smiled, accepting the glass. "Still feels like stepping into a movie set." He shrugged. "Maybe, but the fridge still makes weird noises, and I still burn toast." They moved to the sofa. The lights dimmed low. The view stretched out beyond the glass, city lights twinkling like restless stars. "Thank you for inviting me," she said after a beat. "I wanted you to see the parts people don't get to," Elijah replied. She looked at him. "Why me?" He exhaled slowly, eyes thoughtful. "Because you didn't flinch when I told you about my sister, because you called me out in public, because you listened, even when you had every reason to run." A pause. "Because you make me want to be seen." Chloe swallowed hard, eyes stinging slightly. "You're not invisible, Elijah." He turned toward her then, their faces closer than they'd ever been. "I was," he whispered, "until you slapped me." They both laughed softly. Then the laughter faded, and the silence returned, familiar and full. Elijah leaned in slowly, giving her time to move, to speak, to stop him. But she didn't. Their lips met, gently at first, unsure, then deeper, more certain. Not a fairy tale kiss, but an honest one born from tension and trust and the aching need to feel something real. When they pulled apart, Chloe rested her forehead against his, eyes closed. "This is reckless," she whispered. "Yes," Elijah breathed, "but it feels right." By Saturday morning, Chloe was back in her apartment. She hadn't stayed the night, not because she didn't want to, but because the line they'd crossed was already fragile, and she needed space to think, to breathe. She made coffee and sat at the window, watching the early sun climb over rooftops. Her mind raced, but one thought stuck louder than the rest. "I'm falling for someone I was never supposed to meet." Her phone buzzed. "Elijah. No regrets?" She smiled softly. "Chloe, not one." Then a second message arrived. "Elijah, we have a problem. Meet me at the office." The office clock read 10:27 a.m. when Chloe stepped into the fold and instantly felt the weight in the air. Chloe walked into the meeting room where Elijah was already seated, hands folded, eyes sharp. On the screen in front of him, a leaked screenshot. CEO Elijah Hale reportedly involved with new editorial staffer. Her stomach turned. It wasn't a full article, just a blog post, speculative, sloppy, but loud enough to ripple. "Who would leak this?" Chloe asked, heart pounding. Elijah didn't answer right away. Then he said, "Talia?" Chloe blinked. "You think she warned you, didn't she?" he said, eyes fixed on the screen. "She's been waiting for a reason to push back." Chloe folded her arms, angry now. "So what do we do? Deny it? Pretend nothing's happening?" Elijah turned to her. "That depends. Do you want to pretend?" She looked away. "I don't know." A beat of silence. Then she met his eyes again. "What if this ruins everything?" Elijah stood, walked around the table, and stopped in front of her. "Then we rebuild it," he said softly, "but not by pretending." Chloe felt a lump rise in her throat. "You're not scared?" she asked. "I'm terrified," he said, "but I'm more afraid of losing the first real connection I've had in years." The door suddenly opened. Lena stepped in, holding her phone. "You guys might want to see this," she said. "It's spreading." She turned the screen toward them. Now it wasn't just a blog, it was trending. By noon, Chloe's name was on every gossip site that had ever used the word exclusive without meaning it. Slap-turned seduction, intern rumored to be CEO's new flame, from elevator outbursts to private penthouse nights. Chloe Collins, lucky, reckless, or both. It was brutal. Paparazzi didn't show up at her apartment. Not yet. But the looks she got at coffee shops, the whispers in the hallway at Hale Enterprises, those cut deep. What hurt more than the rumors, though, were the doubts. Not from Elijah, from herself. Around 3 p.m., Chloe sat motionless in a glass-walled conference room, the blinking cursor on her screen mocking her silence. The story she was trying to write felt too far from the chaos of her own life. The story was about quiet strength. She didn't feel strong right now. She felt like a spotlight had burned a hole through her skin. The door opened. Elijah stepped in and gently closed it behind him. "I told PR we're not responding," he said. "At least not yet." Chloe didn't speak. He sat beside her. "I know this is a mess," he said softly. "But we didn't do anything wrong." She turned to him. "Didn't we? You're my boss, Elijah. People think I'm sleeping my way into headlines. They don't care that we waited, or that this started with a mistake." He studied her, his expression unreadable. Then, quietly, he said, "If it helps, I can step back." Chloe's breath caught. "What?" "You deserve to build your own name," he said, "and I won't be the reason it gets questioned. I'll put someone else over the editorial team. We'll keep our distance, for now." It was everything a decent man would say, and yet it shattered her a little. "You think hiding makes it better?" she asked. "No, I think it gives us time." She stood, pacing now. "I don't want to pretend again. I did that in my last job. I watched someone else take credit for my work because I was just a junior. I smiled. I stayed quiet. I did everything right, and they still let me go." Elijah stood too. "You won't disappear here." Chloe looked at him, pain flickering in her eyes. "You can't promise that." A long silence. Then he reached for her hand, voice quiet and certain. "I can't promise what the world will say, but I can promise I won't walk away." She looked at him. Really looked. And the fire that had gotten her here, the same fire that made her slap a stranger to protect someone vulnerable, began to rise again. Then let's stop letting them decide the story. After a weekend of silence and speculation, Monday arrived with more eyes watching than ever before. The newsroom was buzzing with whispers and sideways glances as Chloe walked to her desk. She didn't avoid them, she didn't flinch. She wore a light gray blouse, stood taller than she felt, and opened her laptop like it was just another day at work. It wasn't. A few feet away, Elijah emerged from his office. No entourage, no distraction. He stopped near her desk. Everyone watched. Every single person. He turned to Chloe. "Can we talk?" he asked. She nodded, following him into the conference room. Once the door closed, she whispered, "That was subtle." "I don't do subtle well." She smiled just a little. He pulled a document from his folder and handed it to her, a draft. "Letter from the CEO, why we don't hide anymore." She read the opening lines. It wasn't dramatic, it wasn't romantic, it was honest. "Yes, I care about someone on my team. No, it didn't start with power, it started with humility. With a slap I didn't see coming, and the courage that came after it. The fold is about human stories. This is one of them." Chloe swallowed hard. "Elijah," she said. "I'm not naming you," he added, "not unless you want that. But I want people to know what kind of leadership we stand for." Her voice cracked a little. "What kind is that?" "The kind that fights for truth, even when it's messy, even when it's personal." A long pause. Then she said, "Post it." Later that day, the reaction online was immediate. At first, it exploded. Comment sections lit up. Some mocked, some praised. Some dissected every word of the letter as if it were political scripture. But by sunset, something unexpected started happening. Real stories poured in. A woman wrote, My boss fired me for getting engaged to a coworker. This gave me hope. A man posted, I was told love and leadership don't mix, but maybe vulnerability is a kind of strength. Even a former Hale Enterprises intern wrote, I never thought Elijah Hale was human. I was wrong. Inside the office, the tension began to dissolve. Chloe sat at her desk, watching the numbers climb, not the gossip, but the impact. Her phone buzzed. Elijah, the world didn't end, she typed back. Chloe? No, it might have just started. That evening, Chloe sat curled up on her couch, knees tucked under her, reading through the final version of her article, the one about the woman in the garage kitchen. And for the first time in days, she saw herself in the story. Someone who didn't want to be the headline, just someone who wanted to matter. Quietly, honestly, she hit send, and then the doorbell rang. She opened it to find Elijah standing there. No suit, no script, just him. I didn't want to wait for the next meeting, he said. She smiled softly. Me neither. He stepped inside. No more hiding. 3 weeks after Elijah Hale posted that letter, Hale, the headlines had faded. The gossip died faster than anyone expected, not because people stopped talking, but because the narrative changed. The Fold's launch had gone live the same day the letter did. And when the public saw the stories, the real stories, they forgot the slap. They forgot the penthouse rumors. They remembered the work. Chloe's article, The Woman Who Fed Strangers Before She Fed Herself, was the most read piece on the platform, not because it was dramatic, because it was honest, human. The kind of story people didn't realize they needed until it made them cry in the middle of their lunch break. But behind the scenes, something even more remarkable had unfolded. By 6:30 p.m., the Fold had begun to quiet down. The warm glow of desk lamps stretched long shadows across the glass walls, and Chloe sat near the window, watching the city blur beneath streaks of sunset. In her hands, she held an old photograph, Elijah's sister. He had given it to her days ago, silently. No explanation, no speech, just a look that said, I want you to know who shaped me before you did. It meant everything. A quiet knock on the glass pulled her out of her thoughts. Elijah stood outside, holding 2 coffees and wearing an expression she was starting to recognize, half composed, half cracked open. You're still here, he said, stepping in. So are you, she replied. He set the coffees down and sat across from her. She'd be proud, he said, nodding to the photo in her hand, of what we're building, of you. Chloe's eyes softened. She'd be proud of you too, Elijah. He didn't answer right away. Then, after a beat, he said, I never expected to feel this again, this kind of hope. Chloe leaned back in her chair, eyes fixed on his. And what do you want to do with it? He smiled faintly. Keep choosing it, one day at a time. On a bright Saturday afternoon, Chloe and Elijah stood outside a small building that now looked very different from when Chloe had first seen it. Evelyn, the woman Chloe had written about, had invited them to the reopening of her now expanded community kitchen. Donations poured in after the article, volunteers, a new freezer, a van. Someone even offered her a city grant. But Evelyn never lost that humility. When Chloe and Elijah walked through the door, she hugged them both and whispered, I still don't think I'm a hero. To which Elijah replied, Good, that means you are. Chloe watched him talk with the people, smile at children, carry folding chairs like he wasn't wearing a shirt that cost more than the oven. This was the version of him few had seen, and it was the version she had come to love most, love. The word finally settled, not rushed, not questioned, real. A week later, the rooftop cafe felt different. Same table, same view. But the season had shifted, and so had they. It was warmer now. The rooftop smelled like espresso and sunlight. Chloe sat at the same table where it all began, a notebook open in front of her, her pen moving slowly, deliberately. She was writing a new piece. But this one wasn't for the fold, it was personal. I thought I knew how stories began, with outlines, hooks, a little magic. But some stories begin with a mistake, a loud, public, unfiltered mistake. Some stories begin with a slap. She paused, smiling to herself. Elijah appeared a few minutes later, sunglasses in hand, 2 coffees balanced in his grip. "You always come back to this table," he said, setting one down for her. "It reminds me where everything changed," she replied. He sat, took a sip of his coffee, and said, "Where you tried to ruin my face, you mean?" She laughed. "You really can't let that go, can you?" "Nope," he said, "best slap of my life." They shared a quiet moment, the kind filled not with tension, but with ease. Then he pulled a small box from his coat pocket. Chloe froze. "Elijah." He opened it. No ring, not yet. But inside was a tiny silver key. Simple. Elegant. "To my place," he said. "No pressure, just I'd like to stop pretending I'm better off behind walls." Chloe stared at it, overwhelmed by the simplicity of the gesture and what it meant. "I'm not good at moving fast," she said. "I'm not asking you to," he replied. "I'm asking you to move with me." She took the key, closed the box, and nodded. "I'm already on my way." What started with a slap had turned into a movement. 6 months later, the Fold was no longer a gamble. It was a voice. The Fold was celebrating its first major milestone, 1 million subscribers, partnerships with nonprofits, and a growing team that believed stories could change how people lived. Chloe stood on stage, nervous but glowing. She wasn't just the girl who slapped the CEO anymore. She was the lead editor, the woman who told stories that mattered, the one who gave others a voice, because someone had finally let her find hers. When she finished her speech, the applause was loud and long. Elijah stood in the back of the room, watching her, proud, in awe, and deeply, undeniably, in love. Later that night, they walked side by side through the quiet city, fingers laced together, as if the world had finally slowed down just for them. No one followed them, no photos, no headlines, just peace. "I'm glad I didn't press charges," Elijah teased. Chloe nudged him. "Please, you'd have dropped the case the minute I gave you my first pitch." He laughed. "True." They stopped at the corner before her building. He turned to her, brushing a hair from her cheek. "You know," he said softly, "every time I walk into an elevator now, I think about you. Because you're afraid of getting slapped again?" He shook his head. "Because I never expected one moment of chaos to lead to everything I never knew I needed." Her eyes filled, tears brimming but not falling. "Me either," she whispered. And under the quiet city lights, they kissed. No hiding, no fear, just the ending and beginning they wrote together. The end. Now let me ask you, have you ever made a mistake that unexpectedly led to something beautiful? Tell us your story in the comments. Sometimes, what feels like the worst moment is just the first page of something unforgettable.